Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 9th, 2021 Merriam City Council meeting. I'd like to start our meeting off this evening by asking you to please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Sism.
Here.
Councilmember DeVold.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Naff.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Pape.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Here.
Very good. Next item on our agenda this evening is public items. Members of the public are encouraged to use this time to make comments about matters that do not appear on the agenda. Comments about items on the regular agenda will be taken as each item is considered. Please note there is a 5-minute limit on individuals making public comments. Also, in accordance with the governing body rules and procedures, the city reserves the right to refuse public comments that are personal, impertinent, and slanderous. We don't have anybody that signed up this evening on our sign-up list, but you may have not noticed it out there or didn't know it exists, so I will open up this time for anyone who wishes to come forward with a public item. Please come forward. I'll ask you to, when you get there, to mention your name and address for the record.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Hammond, 5845 Harry Lane, Merriam, Kansas. And I just wanted to let you know about one of our residents, Mary Cashman. She said hi, Whitney. But she was inducted to the Teachers Hall of Fame. Wow. So I wanted to leave this with you. We got our flowers. I didn't know if you might want to do the same.
Yeah.
So.
Just hand it to Police Chief and he'll give it to our city clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to come forward? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward to our consent agenda. We have only one item on the consent agenda this evening, and that's consider approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting held on July 26, 2021. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions before we go any further? If not, I'll entertain a motion in a second. Bob Pape?
Mayor, I'd move the council approve consent agenda item number 1.
Do we have a second?
And I'll be happy to second that.
Motion made and second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember DeVold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naff.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you very much. Move next to our mayor's report. We have 3 items on the report this evening. The very first is a presentation, and I'll let Brian Dyer come and make the introductions.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Mayor Brian Dyer, Community Development Director. This evening from Mid-America Regional Council, we have Kathy Boyer-Chazal. She is the project manager for the Kansas City Communities for All Ages program. Some of you may have heard about the program. Kathy's obviously going to go into great more detail about it. But the city is working towards getting our bronze certification. This is something that was started by our neighborhood services manager, David Izu, who's also here present with us as well, over here to my right. Started to back up in 2020, and obviously at the very start of 2020, we got to start to get the ball rolling, and then a pandemic hit, so this kind of got pushed aside for a little while, and then to a better time to start it back up, and that time started up here this spring, and David reached back out, and so we've started the process again to get ourselves certification for this. So with that, I will get this going, and as Kathy makes her way up here, I'll get the presentation going for her, and let her take it from there. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present some information tonight on the program that you're considering participating with. And can everybody hear me? Because I can amp it up a little bit. So as just mentioned, the KC Communities for All Ages program was started as a partnership between KC Communities for All Ages, an initiative of the Mid-America Regional Council, and the First Suburbs Coalition in 2013. So we've had close to 7 years to experience this, and in a little bit I'll be able to share with you the family of recognition cities. So the first few slides are just some demographics showing from a broad national level down to Merriam. And when we started this program in 2012, this was new news. I'm going to imagine that most of you have heard this, which is primarily AARP data that showed in 2011, the first of the baby boomers began to turn 65. And approximately 10,000 boomers turn 65 every day. And we're at that point now where there are 10,000 turning 65 every day. And this will continue until 2030. So this shows the Kansas senior population, showing the map on the left is 2010 demographics and by county for the state of Kansas, and then the lower right projecting to 2030. And what's the most important is to look at the gold or the yellow counties. Those show the shift that will show counties that will have 25% or greater of their residents or their population that are 65 plus. So it's a pretty dramatic depiction of, at least of the state of Kansas, how the demographic shift is occurring over time. So we'll go from state to metro, and this shows the 9 counties in the metro area, and Johnson County showing 144% increase of residents that are over the age of 65. So when we started this program, it was really a recognition that more and more older adults would reflect a higher percentage of residents across local jurisdictions. But as we become a little bit more aware of this, we're seeing that communities are really reflective of all ages. So there's a couple, and I think you all have this, actually the PowerPoint in your packet. So this is showing the 1990, that's really the traditional kind of pig in the python chart showing the age ranges. And then this is 2030, which is really showing more stovepipe, reflective of communities that really are all ages. And then this next slide, just again, this program isn't just a flash in the aging pan that let's have the boomers, age and die off, and then we'll just go back to normal. That it's followed by the millennials and Gen X. So really, local jurisdictions for some time now will experience a higher percentage of older adults as a percentage of their residents. And then this graph shows Merriam's population, a 16-year comparison, and Mark's research department pulls this information together. And you can see with the gold, or rather the green, that you can see that your population on the right-hand edge is also going to be increasing. So when we started this program, or when we started the discussion with the First Suburbs Coalition, the question was, are communities prepared for this? And if so, what are they doing? What might they do? Because what this means for cities is that a higher percentage of older adults, of the percentage of residents, it really impacts every area of local jurisdictions' operations. But what we've also learned is what's good for the 80-year-old is good for the 8-year-old. So the title of this, Communities for All Ages, is very appropriate. Tomorrow morning, we're going to be having a discussion with the department heads, and we'll be going into a little bit more detail about how an older adult an increase of older adult population impacts each of those areas. But if you have any questions, I'll attempt to answer those as far as the impact on any of these programs. So we developed a program called Communities for All Ages Recognition Program. It has 3 phases, and as mentioned, Merriam is entering, hopefully, the bronze level, which is characterized by a series of awareness activities. And at the conclusion of that, a decision to go into the silver level, which I think I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So at this point, there are 3 phases, and I'll go through those in a little bit more. As a part of the program, and there are several age-friendly community program models that are across the globe, actually. And no matter what the model is, these topics are included in all models for age-friendly community or livability programs. So these 6 topics are a part of what we'll be looking at primarily during the silver level. So this shows the cities and 1 county that are participating in the program as of today. I don't know if you can see it, but hopefully on your handout. So this goes to show the company that you're keeping, and it's really nice to add another. As a Kansas resident, it's nice to possibly add another.
Kathy, just because I've been harassed about it for years, I think Prairie Villages also needs to be on your list somewhere.
No, they're not.
They didn't do it?
No. We'd love to have them.
I thought they were a kickoff program.
They participated in the pilot program that developed the program, but they haven't as yet officially gone through the program.
This is great information for me. Thank you.
But we'd love to have Prairie Village.
Oh, I'll work on that.
And we very much appreciated that they participated in the pilot project.
Okay.
So the Bronx level, as mentioned, is just a series of educational events or activities to help raise the awareness of elected officials, staff, and residents about what it means that your city will have a far greater percentage of older adults and what cities might be able to do. And then this outlines what our role is and the city's role. The silver level, which is, in my experience with this now over 6 years, this is the most intense level. We have a checklist, which is in your packets, and there's a task force that's assigned, and over a series of 5 meetings, we go through each of the actions and policies that are outlined, and it's kind of a snapshot of what Merriam is doing today for each of those, and then there are recommendations that emerge that will go to whatever level that might enhance or improve city operations. But there are 5 meetings, and it's the most intense, but it's the most impactful. And then the gold level is the city applies an age lens to a major city plan. And some cities are actually undertaking a revision, maybe a comp plan update or a park plan update at the same time as the silver level. So some cities earn silver and gold at the same time. And the city determines what their major plan is. I think on this next slide, okay, I'm going to have to recall then out of memory. So as an example of, we have 10 cities that have earned the gold level. So just as an example, we have a couple that have applied the age lens to their updated park plan. 2 cities developed their own unique Communities for All Ages master plan. 3 or 4 cities updated their comp plan with an age lens, and 1 city applied an age lens to their updated bicycle master plan. So if that gives you some sense of that. I'm not sure why that's not on there. So the next levels for Bronx level is to identify leadership. And David has been identified as the champion that I'll work closely with. This shows that the department head presentation was completed, because at one point that was going to be held before this meeting, but it's tomorrow. And hopefully tonight the City Council will adopt a resolution to participate in the program, and then just to develop each of the 3 plans, phase plans, with Mark's assistance. And then there are just a couple optional. We have joint meetings with other community champions. So there are cities that are participating in this, and their champions, they come together. It's kind of a peer support group. We generally have a presentation on a topic with a local expert on a topic that's reflective of age-friendly communities, livable communities, and then champions share what they're doing with emerging issues. And then we have Communities for All Ages Professional Network, which I know there's been Merriam participation at our workshops where we bring in national experts. So those are optional. And I feel like there's a couple slides that are missing, but are there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I realize that this is started by,
Sorry.
Mid-America Regional Council. Is it anywhere else nationally, or you like the pilot program for the nation here?
It's, we developed our own unique Kansas City-based program, so there's no other program like our recognition program across the country. We have had cities adopt elements of our work across the country. AARP has an age-friendly network of 500-some cities. When we started the program, we received feedback from First Suburbs Coalition, primarily elected officials, because that model was developed by the World Health Organization, that we should probably develop something more locally. But this is the only program, but it is guided by principles from other successful models.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Because of attending so many First Suburbs Coalition meetings, I am just delighted that we have capacity to go ahead and move forward with this. We put it on our goals and liking that it's getting done.
Any other questions? Okay, well,
Okay, again, thank you, and I look forward to working with all of you.
very good. Okay, the next item, obviously,
Given that, could I make a motion, Mr. Mayor?
before you do, is there
Oh.
any further questions, comments, concerns by council? And hearing none, seeing none, I'd be happy to accept your motion.
All right. I move that the council approve a resolution of support and participation in the Community for All Ages Recognition Program.
Motion made. Do I have a second? Whitney?
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Motion made and second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naff.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich. Aye. Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Very good. Next item, number 3, is a presentation from the United Community Service Housing Study, and I'll ask Jennifer Jones-Lacey to make the introductions.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll pull up her presentation. So the city of Merriam, along with the county and many of our neighboring cities, participated in the Johnson County Housing Study, and that was led by United Community Services. The study looked at affordability of housing in Johnson County and provides insights into current and future needs in affordability and gaps and attempts to address those gaps. So tonight, Christy Bowman, who is the Director of Education and Planning for United Community Services, will share information about the housing study with you all, as well as present the toolkit that they developed in response to the study to try to give cities some actionable steps that they could take towards addressing those affordability gaps that they discuss in the study. So with that, I'm going to kick it off over to Christy.
Welcome to our meeting.
Can I demask?
Yes, you may.
Okay. I'm just going to kick this off here. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for inviting us here this evening to talk about the housing study. And I also want to kind of give a broader thank you to Merriam on a number of levels in terms of how this housing study work was moved forward. Your city administrator, Chris Engel, was part of this project from the beginning in 2017. and continued all the way through to the end, participating in our technical committee. We had members from the City Council, the Planning Commission, City Administration, who participated in the housing study through small group discussions and listening sessions. And we had 1% of the community residents in Merriam participate in our community housing survey. And I know 1% might not sound like a lot, but that was our goal for the county, was to get to 1%. So Merriam really came through in terms of providing input to this process. And then we also had residents from Merriam who participated in our Housing for All task force. And so I think that I'm very grateful for the work that Merriam has done in terms of moving forward with this work and supporting this work, and I hope that you guys are all proud of that as well. What I want to kind of go through with you, I'm hoping that you've all had a look at the housing study report, all 300 pages of it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I want to walk through the process just a little bit to give you some background, kind of looking at how we got to where we are, and then I'll share just a couple of data points from the housing study, only because I want to kind of try to draw a direct line between some of the recommendations that are included in the housing toolkit as well. So as I said, we kicked this process off in 2017, and it was part of a 3.5-year project that was funded by the Kansas Health Foundation. And it was part of their Healthy Communities initiative, and this was an initiative that was statewide. We were one of 18 counties to participate in this Healthy Communities initiative, and the goal for this project was for us to identify a health equity issue in our county and to work to address that over the next 3 years of the project. And so through a number of listening sessions, going to church groups, community centers, talking to different folks, pulling together data, the health equity issue that we settled on was housing. That housing was the thing that people really kind of kept raising up as this issue that impacted their ability to be as healthy as they possibly could. If you're paying 30% or more of your income on housing, that begins to impact what you can do in terms of keeping yourself and your family healthy overall, whether it's paying for healthy food, whether it's having access to recreation or green space or time off. All of these things can impact health overall. And so once we settled on that, we started to pull together something we called Build the Narrative, where you think about housing and you think about affordable housing in Johnson County, and it seems like a pretty tough nut to crack, and you're right if you think that. And so it was really important for us to find ways to be able to make the issue of housing everybody's issue. So whether it's me being impacted in my own housing situation, or whether it's somebody in a $800,000 house in southern Johnson County who is not impacted at all, trying to figure out how we could make this an issue for everybody in the county. And that's what Build the Narrative was about. So we started talking to stakeholders, we talked to residents, we started putting together videos and lots of data. Our executive director, Julie Brewer, and I call it our chicken dinner tour, where we really just head out to as many different places as we could to start talking about this issue and listening to people about the issue as well. So in 2019, we were able to secure support from 19 communities and Johnson County to fund a housing study. We had not had a housing study in Johnson County since 2004, and a lot had changed, obviously. We'd had a recession in 2008. And so while we had access to quite a bit of data about housing in Johnson County, getting a clear picture of what currently was going on, and then also making sure that we had a picture of what was happening in each of the communities. And that's why we have a 300-page report, right? Each community that participated in the study has its own section. One of the biggest parts of our kind of master plan as part of this Healthy Communities initiative was always that once we finished the housing study, we would pivot to what we called the Housing for All task force. And that was meant to take the stuff from the housing study and bring it to a group of folks, ideally, just the broadest range of lived experiences as we could. We wanted as many people around the table as we possibly could get. We wanted teachers, we wanted elected officials, we wanted residents who were being impacted. so that everybody could bring their perspective and their understanding and their knowledge to what do we do next? You know, do we put the housing study in a drawer and forget about it, or are we going to do something with it? And so that is what became the Housing for All Task Force, which then ultimately led to the toolkit. And so I'll talk about all of those here in a sec. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background in terms of how we got to where we got. So the question we asked from the beginning of this work was, who can afford to live here? Who can afford to live in Johnson County? And why is that important? And so here's just a little piece of data. So from the time we started this project in 2017 until the end of the project, kind of at the end of 2020, housing prices in Johnson County increased over 19%, just in the time we were working on this project. And on the right side of this slide, you can see income increases during that same period of time for some key occupations in the county. And if you look at that, you can see clearly that most income increases are not keeping pace with what housing increases look like in the county. So in Merriam, Merriam to me is one of the most interesting communities in Johnson County. It's different than most of the other communities in Johnson County. One of the things I did to prepare for this presentation was I drove around Merriam, just driving through neighborhoods and kind of checking things out, parts of Merriam that I'd never seen before, just for my own kind of perspective in terms of translating what I know data-wise into what reality looks like in Merriam. 42% of renters in Merriam are housing cost burden. That means they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And so again, when we talk about what housing cost burden means, and if you're paying more than 30% on your housing, it leaves less money for other things that contribute to our overall health and well-being. 17% of homeowners in Merriam are housing cost burden. That's one of the lower numbers actually across the county in terms of housing cost burden for homeowners. One of the higher numbers when we're looking at cost burden countywide. So continuing kind of the conversation of who can afford to live here. And so looking at who can afford to live here, I know this is a very busy slide. This is one of our oldest pieces of data that we used when we first started kind of talking about this issue. But if you look at this slide, on the left-hand side, you can see the county and all of our communities. You can see what the average sales price was in 2020 for a home in those communities. And you can see the income required to afford that price. And what we're looking at there again is less than 30% of living costs. That's what we're looking for when we're thinking about the income. And you can kind of see again, we pulled up what we kind of call foundational occupations. So you're thinking about everything from food prep and retail to teachers, to paramedics, to firefighters, thinking about who can afford to live where. And this is looking at individual incomes. We're not talking about household incomes, but this is individual incomes. But it is also important to know that over 30% of the households in Johnson County are single income households. So this is the same chart, but looking at rentals versus the slide before that was looking at home ownership. And so this is the 2019 median rent for all of the communities in Johnson County that have rentals. A couple of our communities don't have any rental properties at all. But again, this gives you an idea of who can afford to live here and why it's important for us to be able to have these folks living in our community. So I'm going to just dive into a couple of data points from the housing study. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, you kind of think of the three-legged stool concept in my mind, and that's jobs, housing, and transportation. Right, so you think about jobs, housing, and transportation. If you look at this particular map, this is looking at where the place of work is for people who are making less than $1,250 per month. So the darker area is a higher concentration of those employers. And a lot of folks will say, well, but you're talking about teenagers or college students, people doing stuff after school. But that's kind of why we supply the age grouping there. So when you look at the ages of the people who are actually workers making less than $12.50 a month, it's not just teenagers. It's not just college kids who are in these occupations. Transportation, obviously, you can see that a lot of these things are clustered along major transportation routes such as, I-35, 435, 69 highway. So, age of housing, I'm probably not going to tell you guys anything that you are unaware of, but you've got a lot of houses that were built before 1950 in Merriam, and only about 22% built after 1980. This is an opportunity for Merriam in my book, and I'm going to kind of talk about that when we talk about recommendations. But it does give you some ideas related to deterioration or need for a rehabilitation or repair in Merriam. And if you look at some of these areas, you see that as many as 20% of the residents are cost burdened in those areas. Construction activity, this is looking between 2010 and 2019. Building permits pulled, so the blue dots are building permits, the green dots are demolition and rebuild, and then the red dots are just demolitions. Merriam has had a pretty steady construction rate in terms of home construction, and about 85% of those are single-family homes that have been built in this time period from 2010 to 2019. Moving forward, these are just some estimates that were provided in the housing study in terms of what would be the housing need that Merriam would have between now and 2030. And so you can kind of see down here at the bottom what kind of need you're looking at in terms of cumulative need. This one is actually breaking it down in terms of what do you need for owner-occupied, what do you need for renter-occupied, and what kind of price range are you looking at in terms of where the need would be. So as I mentioned, we had a good response rate for Merriam on our community housing survey. The survey was done in the summer of 2020, so it was done in the middle of the pandemic, and we hemmed and hawed about whether or not we should go forward with it, but we did, and we got great response. Overall, we had about 4,600 people across the county participate, and we had paper copies, online copies, in English and Spanish. I was dropping them off at community centers and libraries, any place I could think of where people would want to pick those up and fill them out. But one of the feedback points that we asked people for was, what kind of housing do you think you have enough of, or does your current housing adequate for certain groups of folks? So you can see here that people from Merriam responded that there is a lack of housing for multi-generational families, people with a physical disability or mental disability, students and workers making less than $16 an hour. Or households that need to be close to transit access. I did drive all over Merriam, and I did have a hard time finding bus stops or access points for public transportation. Another thing about Merriam, and this is also something that I noticed as I was driving around, a lot of lot diversity in terms of size. Like, it's not a cookie cutter kind of setup like you see in a lot of other parts of the county. There is a lot of diversity. I saw everything when I was driving around Merriam. And that is another opportunity when we talk about recommendations and how you might want to move forward with some of the information from the housing study. A lot of people in Merriam are aware of the existing grant programs for rehabilitation and repair. That was not true across the rest of the county. So again, that is something that residents in Merriam seem to have an awareness of. And again, that's a great opportunity for the city. And then mixed use development. There's an opportunity definitely in the downtown area in terms of mixed use development. So this is something that you'll see in the housing study. And it really is looking at kind of housing stages, and it ties in really well to the presentation that Kathy just did, thinking about the community for all ages. And you can kind of think about where where you are in this process, where most of the homes in Merriam are in this process. And I drove around and I kept thinking, Merriam is a great place for people to start families. Merriam is a great place for people to start accumulating wealth. It's a great place to start raising your kids. And so you kind of can see throughout the aging stages where you might want to be housing-wise, but you think about aging again, and again, I come kind of back to Merriam because it seems to me that there are a lot of potentials for people to age in place in Merriam. So we launched the Housing for All Task Force once we had the results from the housing study, and as I said, we were aiming to have as many people from as many different lived experiences as possible come together and share what they knew and what they wanted and what their vision was for housing in Johnson County going forward. And we ultimately had about 125 people participate in these task force sessions. They took place in February and March. They were virtual. They were 2-hour sessions that we held in the evenings. And people just kept coming back and kept participating, and we were really actually blown away by the community engagement in this process and how many people were truly interested and staying engaged in this work. One of the things that was discussed during the Housing for All Task Force was barriers. Throughout those 4 workshops, we went through the housing study and identified possible barriers, we identified possible opportunities, we prioritized and ranked different possible recommendations and goals for the toolkit that was the result of the Housing for All Task Force. So these are some potential barriers. These arrows we kind of move around, but it is an opportunity for each community to kind of look at this list and ask themselves, what are the things that we want to work on, or what are the things that are challenging us in our community? So these are the 5 main recommendations that you'll find in the Housing for All toolkit. And I'm just going to pull out a couple of things that, again, when I think about Merriam and I think about the housing study and kind of what we learned about Merriam, these are just kind of some of the things that I think align with what you might kind of want to pull out of the toolkit. So goal 1, preserve and rehabilitate existing housing stock. This has Merriam written all over it for me. And you know, I think that this is not something that you're not doing. I think that this is something that people in your community are very aware of. It's something that is definitely happening in the community. One thing that came up as a recommendation that I thought was really interesting for other communities that we've talked about is promoting the opportunity to purchase. So as I was driving through Merriam, there were a lot of really appealing ranch homes that I drove by. And I am a landlord. And, you know, I couldn't help but look around and think, like, these are great houses. Like, I could live in one of these houses, or this would be a great rental property. But the opportunity to purchase gives the person who's renting that home the opportunity to buy that home if the seller is putting it up for sale, so that you maintain home ownership in that community versus generating investment wealth there. Reduce overall household expenses so housing is more affordable. Merriam has one of the lowest household median incomes in Johnson County. It's it's just under $64,000 a year is the median household income in Merriam. And that's about what it is nationally. So Merriam has a really good reflection of a lot of national trends when you look at housing and you look at income. But the poverty level in Merriam is also 11%, and that's about twice what it is in the county as a whole, which is why I highlight this one, because it is about reducing overall household expenses and making housing more affordable for everybody who's living there. So this can be things like expanding utility assistance resources. This can be thinking about transportation and how you provide better, more reliable access to transportation, support incentives, anything that will make overall housing expenses cheaper. So that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with affordable housing itself as much as it has to do with living So this really dovetails nicely with Kathy's presentation, because I was definitely going to talk about community for all ages. I think that I'm excited to hear that Merriam is embarking on this process. I think it is something that I hope many more communities in Johnson County try to achieve. But there are a couple of different things that you can do. I think, thinking again to the varying lot sizes in Merriam, it does make it a good kind of appealing place to do accessory dwelling units. That could be another solution to housing needs. Goal 4, again, this kind of talks to what you're already doing. So look at 4C, for instance. It's creating a central database of existing housing programs and resources. And that's something that needs to be done countywide and, frankly, regionally. And Mark right now is in the process of putting together what they're calling a housing hub. And so I'm hopeful that this is something that we're going to be seeing that will provide information city-wise, county-wise, and for the region. And then lastly, build affordable and attainable housing advocacy. One thing that I noticed that really gave me a lot of energy around this work was the community engagement that we had. The engagement we had in the housing study, the engagement we had in the Housing for All task force, how many people have continued to want to be engaged in this work. Having the community involved and having the community having a voice and a vision for what our communities could be is a really important goal countywide. Not just here in Merriam. If you look in the housing toolkit, you'll see that there are a lot of case studies, most of them focusing on kind of Midwest communities. This one is New Jersey, so not Midwest, but most of them are. This is a pocket neighborhood, which is one of my favorite housing solutions, just in terms of having a cottage court or a pocket neighborhood that can be existing within other types of housing in a particular neighborhood. And then thinking about the connection between transportation, housing, and workforce. As I said before, those are kind of the three-legged stool in terms of affordable housing and attainable housing in our communities. In terms of how we measure success, you'll find this in the toolkit as well, but we thought it was really important to make sure that we had some measurable ways to say, yes, we've done this, or no, we haven't. And so you can see everything here from increasing the amount of housing units to increasing transit, improving health outcomes. But these are some of the ideas that we have in terms of how do we measure our success in this work in the long run. So, there we go. I feel like I blew through a lot of information really quickly. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can find the housing study and the housing toolkit on UCS's website. There's a tab when you go to our homepage that says Housing Toolkit, and that'll take you to both of those documents, and you can explore them. You can navigate the toolkit online, or you can pull up the PDF and print it out for yourself. Yeah.
I know this isn't really a question specific to our community compared to other local communities, but how does the local government funding through property tax here compared to other areas, and what's the impact on this question of affordability and housing, and how many people who are constrained, how that impacts that group specifically?
Yeah, I would say that is nationwide. That is the primary way, like the property taxes, for instance, are the primary way that the schools are funded. And that is not ideal. I think that there, as we did this work, we did a lot of work with the Incremental Housing Alliance, kind of talking about different ways and different approaches, for instance, to generate revenue that isn't based strictly on property tax. So it could be, for instance, on a lot. So maybe the lot has an apartment building on it, or it has a condo, or what have you. Or the lot has one house versus a block that might have 3 houses. So I think that there are a variety of different ways to address that. I don't know that there is a way to address that practically anytime in the near future, but it's definitely something that we have talked about quite a bit.
Jason?
Something we've discussed somewhat informally in a few of these meetings was mother-in-law suites. What's UCS's stance on outbuildings like mother-in-law suites?
We are all for them. So yeah, they're granny flats, accessory dwelling units. It's a great way to help people to age in place, so they can be close to family, they can stay in their community. It's a great way for somebody to generate passive income as well, and it's a great way to provide an affordable place for somebody to live in a community. I know that there are a number of different cities that are looking at this right now. I feel like Overland Park is really exploring this pretty seriously because we would need to have some kind of zoning changes for that to happen. And I think that another thing that would be great for us to see would be some demonstration sites. I think if people could drive by a place and say, oh, look at that accessory dwelling unit, granny flat, like that's so cute, what a neat thing. And it also, makes the neighborhood a little bit more interesting. So I think that could also be something that would be really helpful, just in terms of helping people visualize what that would look like.
Thank you.
Other questions? Excuse me. Okay, well, thank you. Your information's been very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. We're going to move to council items. First item is approval of an ordinance adopting the 2021 Uniform Public Offense Code. Chief, you want to tell us what we're looking at here?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Every year, the Kansas League of Municipalities publishes the UPOC and the STO. UPOC stands for Unified Public Offense Code. STO stands for Standard Traffic Offense Code. The STO deals with traffic offenses. The UPOC deals with misdemeanor ordinance violations, such as thefts, batteries, that type of thing. So the first ordinance is the adopting of the UPOC for 2021. There were some minor changes, some minor additions to statutes that went over it. One of the biggest ones is they removed the defense for people involved in sexual battery that one of them was a spouse. That was a very old statute. They removed that from it, so now, rightfully so, the spouse can be a victim of a sexual battery. That was updated in 3.2.1. Another key one is trespassing on critical infrastructure. That just basically means now that instead of, i.e., we get people trespassing on the railroad property, we can actually cite that ourselves now. We don't have to have railroad come in and cite for us. And that goes for other things like water, electricity, those type of infrastructure things that we do have here in Merriam. So it allows us to take action on that on our own through that new section. Unlawful tampering with electronic monitoring equipment. We don't currently use these in our courts, but if our court ever decided to put someone on probation and give them an electronic leg bracelet, we would be able to charge them if they cut it off and remove it, which they're likely to do. There's two voting-related additions. One is distribution of unattributed applications for advanced voting ballots. Basically, it's just established rules for people who are third parties that send out advanced balloting information, just information on what they have to do to legally do that, and it's a violation if they don't. Electioneering adds new limits when a ballot can be handled by a candidate. Really no huge update to that. There's some exceptions they added in that ordinance for poll workers and things like that. No surprises there. Another new section is 9.3, violation of executive order under KSA 48-925. Basically, if we have a natural disaster here, a Merriam tornado goes through, and governor declares it a disaster area, and we establish a curfew and limit people going in and out of the disaster area, this ordinance gives us the ability to write a citation to people who violate those things. Rest of everything else, the changes that were listed in the action sheet are just grammar errors that were corrected and things like that. Also, when we approve the UPOC, there's several sections that are listed here. 6.21, 6.22, which involve hunting, and then 9.91 through 9.96, which involve misdemeanor drug offenses. We're asking those not be included as approved as the UPOC because we have Merriam municipal codes that address those issues more specific to the needs of the city. So we always remove those. I got any questions on the UPOC?
Ms. Hands?
Yes, I have one. The 7.5 especially, distribution of applications. That's something that is not included in my candidate packet that I got from the election office. So I'm wondering if we think it might be appropriate for us to be sure all of our candidates are aware of this, because it appears to be a change. And I'm willing to ask the election office if you think that's more appropriate, but it was not in my candidate packet. And I think in the past, I did have a copy of how to apply for an advance ballot, so.
We can reach out to the election board and ask them.
Thank you.
And just to underscore what you may have already said, these changes have to do more with mirroring an existing state law that was passed on July 1, or went into effect July 1, so that we'd be in the same level as the state. We're not making this stuff up just for something to do. Any other questions? And again, this is an annual thing, that you come forward with whatever changes there are. The nice thing about this, it keeps us current, so that we're not going to conflict with the state law on anything. And Kansas League puts this together and does all the work for us. We just have to pay for the books, and they're not cheap. So if there aren't any other discussion, I guess the next thing we need to do is waive the first reading, and Bob keeps raising his hand, so I guess he wants to do it.
I'm ready when you're ready, Mayor.
Go right ahead.
I'll move the council waive the customary first reading of an ordinance adopting the 2021 UPOC.
And
Chris?
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Caldwell?
Aye.
Councilmember Naff?
Aye.
Councilmember Neal?
Aye.
Councilmember Pape?
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers?
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge? Aye. Councilmember DeBold?
Aye.
Councilmember Hands?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the standard traffic ordinance. Bob Pape.
Mayor, I'd move the council approve an ordinance adopting the 2021 UPOC.
And a second.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk?
Got it right. Mayor got it wrong.
Councilmember Naff?
Aye.
Councilmember Neal?
Aye.
Councilmember Pape?
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers?
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge? Aye. Councilmember DeBold?
Aye.
Councilmember Hands?
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Very good.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move, let's see, do we need to move to standard traffic ordinance? That's next. And I think I
Way
said
too
approve, I think I said approve the standard traffic ordinance, but it was, the motion was.
All right. Standard traffic ordinance. Very minor changes in this year. They changed some definitions in the definition section, what an all-terrain vehicle, antique golf cart, and such are. Most of that had to do with some of the changes they made to some of the statutes regarding those things. One of the biggest sections, or they added a new section as it regards to funeral processions. They just allowed cities now to request prior notice and have certain requirements in place. We currently do not require that. We have very few that go through the city anyway. So I don't see right as right now that we implement any kind of changes. However, the ordinance allows us to do that now. Fleeing and attempting to elude a police officer, they just updated some sections that kick those violations into felonies if you're doing certain acts or certain things. So they just updated the STO to reflect that. That's pretty much the major changes in the STO. They really didn't mess with the STO much this year, so.
Any questions on that? Well, we're going to try to waive the first reading again, so I'll take a motion. Chris Hands.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council waive the customary first reading of an ordinance adopting the 2021 STO.
Do I have a second? Bob Pape.
I'll second, Mayor.
Made and seconded. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naff.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
That being said, I'll accept a motion for the approval of the standard traffic ordinance. Chris Hands.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve an ordinance adopting the 2021 STO.
Bob Pape.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naff.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
You're all done now, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Item number 3, CIP update. Director McDonald, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. Let me get this.
The overlay project on Frontage Road looks excellent.
Yes, they're just about done with that, which is a good thing. Okay, I have your August CIP update this evening. The 2021 Street Improvement Program, I'm going to start with that section first. Our mill and overlay, which is a separate program from the East Frontage and the CarMax, that program is substantially complete. Sod is scheduled to be completed in September when sod season starts. The sidewalk maintenance and repairs, which was 61st Street, 60th Terrace, Knox, and 60th Street have been completed. Seeding is scheduled same time in September. Let me get there. And then we had the CarMax East Frontage Road. All scheduled curbs, sidewalks, replacements have been completed. The mill and overlay portion was completed August 2nd. Weather permitting, they plan on doing the pavement markings this week. Looks like hot, good weather, so they started marking those areas today, and they'll start putting some of the pavement markings down. So that'll be completed this week. We have sod restoration, again, in September when the sod season starts. Last Friday, there was 14 Amur flame maples were planted behind the guardrail in front of a CarMax. As of this writing, they didn't complete that, but they took care of that. And then there's a new traffic signal mast arm that we're putting on the eastbound 67th Street. It has not arrived yet. And we anticipate the installation somewhere September, early October for that. They're having supply delays on that. And then the last thing I have is their West Vernon preliminary engineering study. BHC has completed the existing conditions. And they are currently working on the potential improvements with the estimated cost. We should be receiving that in the next few weeks. So that's all I have on these. And you can ask any questions on Public Works or anything related.
I'm sure everybody's busy out there trying to stay cool. And Bob, do you have a question?
Yeah, could you just address, I understand that we're going to be having an opportunity for the residents to purchase trees coming up pretty quick. Is that, could you?
Yes, it's on our website. I believe there's at least 14 trees, I think, that we have out for residents to purchase. We're providing a subsidy of $15 for the first 2 trees that they purchase. I believe it ends this week. Friday, I think, is when the orders end, and then it'd be the next month, September 11th, when they can pick them up at Public Works. So,
Thank you.
Jason?
I just want to clarify for all the people that watch this YouTube on their own from home. You meant 14 varieties of trees?
yes, I believe so,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Very good.
And we're not going to have any more water line breaks?
I cannot promise that.
Oh,
Yes, last
okay.
week was a busy week for
It
Waterwind
was.
in our city, yes.
It was.
I will not make no promises.
Go big or go home.
That's, there you go.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks
Thank you.
again. Okay, I've got staff items, but before we get to staff items, I'm going to inject another issue for discussion. Today, I spoke with Councilperson Yodrich concerning an issue that she wanted to discuss with council on masking. So I told her I would give her some time at tonight's meeting for that discussion. And now is the time, so Whitney, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. So mask mandates are unfortunately coming back into our lives because COVID cases, especially among the unvaccinated, are growing so rapidly that hospitals in our area are now strained. Just in the last week, actually, if you didn't attend the Friday morning call with the region's chief medical officers, I have a recording of the call. I attended it. It's pretty grim. I can forward you the recording if you haven't watched it. But essentially, I mean, in addition to what you would expect that we've heard from them, Children's Mercy hit an all-time high for inpatient COVID cases as well. Johnson County mandated masks for K through 12 students. Businesses have started mask mandates for all customers. Just today, I believe on Twitter, I saw Home Depot started for all customers as well. And a group of us got the dreaded "you may have been exposed to COVID" email after taking the Turkey Creek floodplain tour with Congress Representative Sharice Davids. I hope she's feeling better soon. And in addition to that, other cities have started exploring municipal level mask policies. Some are going scorched earth and some are, just in the exploratory phase. And I'm not surprising anyone with emotion, so everybody take a deep breath. It won't be that. But my intention is to have a discussion about where we're at now. And if we were to tighten mask requirements, what could that or would that look like? And I think now is a good time for us as a group to come to this consensus, because it's a little unclear who's going to make the call next, at what level of government. A lot of people are kind of passing the buck between levels of government. And I think it's valuable for us to say, is this something that makes sense for our staff to research and come to us with a recommendation on? They have experience enforcing these things that we don't have. And, we get emails and they get yelled at. It's kind of, the juxtaposition of both things. So I want to open it up to have a really productive discussion from an administrative and enforcement perspective to see if this is something that as a group we should say, yes, go take a look at this, or if we should say this is not something we think would be valuable for the people who live in and work in and come to Merriam. We really would need it to be managed at a different level of government. So that's, every time I turn my head, I lose the audio. So that's where I'm at. So I want to just open up a discussion. Let's have it.
Scott, you had your hand up first.
Well, I guess I need some clarification. Are you talking, because right now, obviously, we're all masked.
Yes.
Are you talking about a citywide mask mandate that we produce?
That's one of the questions I have. What does the next step look like? I believe right now we have, it's mandated for employees who can't sit in the office who can't be further apart than 6 feet and indoors only, right? Right, so that's us right now, so we're within the policy. And that does not affect any of the outdoor workers, any of the public works, anything like that, right? Clish, do you want to clarify?
Correct. If there's more than one person in a vehicle, they have to be masked. If we're interacting with the public, we have to be masked. Or if you cannot socially distance in the back of the house. So when I come out of the back to go use the restroom, I need to be using a mask. If I'm walking down the hallway, just to go to the coffee pot, there's nobody in the hallway, it's right across the hallway. I can run out there and fill out my coffee cup and come back to my office. But if someone comes into my office and we can't socially distance, then yes, masks are absolutely required.
And none of these policies currently affect citizens coming in or visitors coming in. It's employees only.
Correct. We just
Okay.
strongly recommend that we follow the CDC recommendation and that all people mask up, but it's a strong recommendation.
Right. That is something, too, to clarify, is that the CDC has updated their recommendation to say that anyone who even is vaccinated is indoors with a mask on because we are in America's favorite hotspot. So,
Mr. Gould.
Hopefully I still have the floor. First of all, I'll never vote for a mask mandate, okay? That's wrong, okay? The thing that, first of all, what it sounds to me like is that we have within our facilities, within the city limits here, a plan based on medical professionals. First of all, none of us are doctors, okay? And if you are, I apologize. A medical professional, okay? So to me, us making a decision to say that anybody that walks into our city has to have a mask is just wrong. Now, that's overstepping our boundary. It's the government's overstep, okay? Do the masks save lives? Yes, I'm not arguing that part at all, okay? I'm never going to argue that because I want to see my 2 grandbabies. I wear a mask, all right? And I think that's the common sense part of this that we all need to look at, is that if we have a situation that dictates that we wear a mask, then we do that. If I'm on a farm somewhere, or I'm, again, there's going to be situations where I shouldn't have to do that, vaccinated or unvaccinated. So again, saying that you're going to enter the city limits of Merriam and have to wear a mask, you'll get a no from me.
I don't think that's what anyone's
Well,
saying,
and again,
but I appreciate the
Okay,
input.
but hopefully
yeah.
everybody understands where I'm coming from that one, okay?
Yeah.
Be smart, protect yourself and others, and I believe that totally. And if that means wearing a mask, we do that. But I'm not going to tell you have to wear a mask.
Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I was, I was going to just see if staff had any information on sort of where the county is in terms of the health department and their thinking at this point. I know this is sort of a fluid thing with the Delta variant. And what are you hearing, basically? Because it seems to me that, public health decisions, if they come from the county, are more appropriate because they do have resources, they have professional staff that monitors this very closely. And so I just kind of wanted to get a sense of what you all are hearing.
I am not aware of the county currently contemplating a mandate, but I'm just not aware of that. That doesn't mean that they're not. Jennifer, any? Yeah, I mean.
Well, they did issue, and this was action that they took on August the 5th. Of course, I'm blind, but, and that talks about the mask mandate for they issued a public health order aimed at slowing the spread of COVID-19, pertains to schools attended by students up to and including 6th grade. So that's the extent of what they've done so far. They are, just like CDC, strongly recommending other than that, but in terms of enacting something for private citizens, that's as far as they've gone. I will say that I am aware of what Prairie Village did. In terms of enforcement of public health orders, that is under the laws of the state of Kansas, and they modified these in the last session. That is something that is left to the county to adopt public health orders and to have enforcement authority. And so, in fact, one of the things that they did in the last legislative session is it used to be you could have your public health official issue the order. Well, they wanted more accountability, the legislature did, and they required that the governing body of the county actually take action on any public health orders like that. So I'm aware of what Prairie Village did. My understanding is that there is either a threat of, or it may have already been filed, legal action associated with their action. There is no clear authority under state law for cities to adopt public health orders like that.
That's very helpful, just to clarify that for everyone.
I think it's also important to point out or to recall, and I appreciate Mr. Dank bringing up the legislative session, that Governor Kelly actually vetoed a bill this last session that was passed by both the House and the Senate that would hold mandate issuing governing bodies, and correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology, I think this is all recollection, would hold them liable for any loss of revenue. They wanted to essentially divert ARPA funds from the federal government to go to a pool that would reimburse businesses confidentially that simply reported to the state that because there was a mask mandate, I lost 15% of my revenue, and it required a veto of Governor Kelly. So at the staff level, as we've thought about what is appropriate response and how far we should ratchet things down, our legal ability and our legal liability is something that we've tried to kind of mix into that decision tree, and that is a piece of that legal liability that's, well, it didn't pass, it was vetoed, doesn't mean it won't come back next year in some sort of different form. And it was actually backdated, so it wouldn't have been moving forward if it would have passed, if it wouldn't have been vetoed, it would have went back to a year prior. So we could potentially, I'm just issuing what could happen, we could face some sort of legal liability down the road that we're not even aware of.
That would be, just for clarification, if we, as a city, instituted some sort of a mask ordinance, or some sort of, yeah.
If I recall the way the legislation was working, it was any body, any governing body
Right.
that issued some sort of mandate that was harmful, that could be economically harmful to a business.
So that includes the county.
I believe it was everyone. It was the county, it was the state, it was cities, it was.
It'd be interesting to note if that also applied to the county, and then if we would have to give money to the county in addition to that, or if the county would only be responsible.
When it was in between, I do remember the conversations we were having between passage and the veto, there was a lot of positioning between cities and the county about who, because if you will recall, we allowed enforcement of the county. And so there was some conversation about, by us allowing the county to enforce their health order, if we would be held liable under that potential law. And we never ended up having to dig too far into it because it was vetoed. But, I mean, those are the type of things that could pop up that we just need to be aware of, just potential future liability.
Well, and then Darren, I'd probably like your input on this too, about the stickiness of enforcement if it were to happen, and prioritizing, and I don't think our officers can run around and ticket anybody who's not wearing a mask, right?
I'm completely against enforcing a local mask mandate. I don't have the people, the time, or the energy to do such a thing.
Great. I mean, not great, but.
I mean, you could pass it, whether or not we could actually enforce it, at what cost?
And at point, it wouldn't make sense to have something that didn't have teeth, I would think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to look at these things. I think the way we proceeded after or during the last round, or the first round of COVID, I think we were much better off on a couple different levels. One, we went into an education mode. County handled enforcement, what little enforcement there was, and we did not alienate our community. I do not want to be responsible for alienating any part of our community by enforcing a mask mandate. That's a door I don't think we want to open, and that's
Right.
a door I'm not willing to open. It's a conversation I'm willing to have, but as it stands now,
However, should the council determine that that's what they want us to enforce, that's what we'll enforce, is I think what the chief is trying to say.
And that's why we're having the discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Wait a minute, Jason had his hand first, and then we'll move down.
Yeah, so this obviously is a very difficult subject, and at this time, I kind of am stuck between where Whitney is and where Scott is, and.
Well, I'm not anywhere.
I'm sorry,
I
I'm
just want to
sorry.
be clarified. I just want to
Okay,
have.
the topic that you brought up and where Scott stands, because I agree with Scott where I just wish people would just do it on their own and be smart about it and not have to force us to put targets on our backs by even talking about mandating. I also, you brought it up, Whitney, I have major concerns about how this would affect our police department. I really wish that if a mandate was necessary, that all of our Johnson County cities would do it at the same time, because being such a small city, it seems difficult to convince people as they're driving through our, five square mile city to put on a mask. But I will also throw out there that my real job outside of working for city council, I work for a company that educates and helps keep family physicians certified. This is the first week that we're going back to work in the office, and we have a mask mandate in place. And my company, the company I work for, also helps guide our DC politicians in forming legislation. So I do understand how important masks are. And so I'll just repeat, I wish people would just do it on their own and help keep the targets off of our backs, but I know that's probably not going to happen.
Chris?
Yes. In the past, we've done resolutions that say we support certain actions. We've done that about various climate change kind of situations and a lot of other things over the years. So I would be supportive of saying we support entities, whether it be schools or business owners or the people at City Hall who require masks, and that we're supportive of those people doing that. Now, I don't know how we demonstrate that support besides saying we passed a resolution that says we support you.
Bob Pape's next.
Yeah, I think some of the things, that, not to reiterate what's been said, but I agree with a lot that's been said in reference to, as an individual city, I think it makes it very difficult and confusing for people driving through Merriam to go, oh, is that one of the cities where I have to wear a mask? Or I don't have to, or I have to in Shawnee, or I don't have to do it in Mission. I think that's a metro, thing that needs to be addressed, whether it be at county level. I support the use of masks. We talked about education. I think the chief and some other people talked about helping to educate the public more. I think that's our role as a local government, is to try to make sure that people are aware of the increase of COVID cases. One, that they know how bad it really is out there. I did listen to the site that Whitney went and forwarded that to me, and thank you for allowing me to view that. And I encourage everybody to reach out and just to see how bad things are actually as bad now as they were when we had the first mandate that the state and the county and everybody enacted. So it is getting scary again. But we as a city, I think, need that educational role. We really need to amp up our, efforts, and maybe we're already doing this, Chris. I guess I'll turn this to you. And I know we provide masks, but maybe we put more masks at each of the stations, and we encourage people, if they're not wearing a mask, just say, hey, you're welcome to take a mask if you would like. Just to tell people that we are supportive of wearing a mask, and we will give you a free mask if you want to wear it. Not mandating that they wear a mask, but just encouraging them and offering up the mask that they may or may not be wearing. Putting in Merriam and all those other things about the seriousness of COVID, that masks help. Please get vaccinated. I mean, even, to that level that, I know in this presentation that was given by all the medical doctors itself in the metro area here, of the people, 95% of all the people that are currently hospitalized with COVID symptoms or with COVID were not vaccinated. So there are 5% of vaccinated people that did end up, but 95% of the people in the hospitals right now, and the majority of those that are dying, obviously, were the ones that aren't obviously vaccinated. So those are the things I wish that we as a council or we as a city could do.
David, you're next. David Neal first.
Well, my frustration with all of this conversation is that the whole mask discussion is dealing with is not the solution. It's dealing with the people not getting vaccinated. This whole last thing is all self-inflicted because we have people that have chosen not to get vaccinated. And so if we want to spend some time and energy in any type of public campaign to educate people, let's deal with vaccinations. Let's not deal with masking. It's just a symptom. The real solution is getting people vaccinated. So, and I don't know if any of that has to do with city government. It's more of a county and state issue. And so I don't even know if us talking about it is very positive or does any good.
Ms. Neal.
I was going to say, from the first question I asked, my sense is that that we're not really the right place to be addressing that at this moment. And I would like to see the county and their expertise and their data that they have take the lead in any type of recommendations on public health matters. However, I think you put the tail on the donkey here. The problem is there's a headwind of anti-vaccination information that's got a lot of people not getting vaccinated. And I don't know what we can do about that, but vaccinations are probably the best bet and to stop this. And I feel like over time, I'm hopeful that this increase in that we're seeing, that is, the data is showing is the serious cases are for people that are unvaccinated will hopefully break through and more people will get vaccinated. I have difficulty when we first had mask requirements. There wasn't an alternative to protecting ourselves. There wasn't a viable way to protect ourselves. So masks were used so that someone who is infected won't spread it as easily to other people. Well, now there's ways that you can protect yourself if you choose to. If you choose not to, that's your choice. And so that, to some degree, to me, lessens the burden that we have by requiring everybody to wear masks so that we are protecting people who choose not to avail themselves of a possible way of protecting themselves. So it's a very difficult issue, and my sense is that I hate to see people getting sick again and this thing spreading again. The Delta variant is different, but I just don't think that a mandate at the city level right now would make sense after hearing all that I've heard from the staff, and I think we need to wait and see what the county does, but this is tough.
Whitney?
Great. So just to be respectful of everybody's time, then I just thank you for having this conversation. I think it's important that we had it, even though it's frustrating. And it sounds like sentiment is that moving forward with any kind of municipal mandate, I think we're all in agreement, it's not a good idea, right? This is not our time, this is not our place. We would not be able to successfully do this without the county, and it really is up to levels of government that have the power to enforce and work out those details. I just want to make that clear for everybody. Okay, great. Is there any other kind of, any other value that you guys see in participating in an education campaign or putting something that is in the e-news or the highlights, or if we are already, Jenna would know better than I would. Is there any value in exploring that?
Mr. Engel?
She already does.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, I was just going to point out and remind the council that I think we'd shared this back a couple times, but maybe not enough time, that in 2020, I think our number, and we'll look for a head nod from Jenna, our communications guru, our number one page was our COVID page. I mean, it by far. I mean, it was striking how much that page was visited compared to all of our other pages. Is that correct? Yeah. I mean, so, but what I'm hearing is that we need to perhaps shift maybe some of that focus to the vaccination. I don't know if campaign's the right word, but we need to spend a little bit more time on updating that page and with a focus on perhaps what the current recommendations are and updating that information as it comes to vaccinations. Would that be a fair assessment of what
I think that
the
would
will
be
of the council
valuable
would
from
be?
my perspective, yeah.
Sure, I mean, I know it's already out there because I pass it along. So if it's possible to beef it up, I would agree with that, but we're already doing it.
Sure.
And again, I don't know what I haven't looked to see what's recently in there, but I think any kind of updates on where people can get, vaccinated and times and that sort of thing are locally close by would be helpful.
There might be a county link to that information that already exists. I mean, we could just put it in there.
On the COVID-19 page, I do put vaccination clinics that are around, but it is something that I can look for more. Usually they have a set on Friday about what's coming up for the weekend, so I'll put those down and then link it to other places that have clinics. But I can definitely be more robust about that and update the top part of the COVID-19 page to push the vaccinations.
Scott?
My only comment on that would be informational only. I mean, in no way can that be perceived as a directive or anything. That needs to be, I mean, we need to be very careful about how that's worded.
I agree.
And again, make sure, because there are people that don't believe in it, and I think it's wrong, but again, they have that right to believe that too, and they have the right to not get that. So again, I think the informational part of that is very, very important.
I think one of the things, I mean, in my travels, I'm seeing more and more signs that say strongly suggest, strongly recommend, and as opposed to mandate. Some people are looking at that, because I've been to places where people walk in and everybody in the place had the mask on, and a person said, "Do I have to wear a mask?" And they say, "No, it's just highly recommended," and they didn't, or did, or whatever. But the other thing is, one of the issues that may come up in the future is we've got businesses now that are requiring it. Home Depot's requiring it. A lot of people are going to walk in there, they're going to see that it's required, or they're going to be told it's going to be required. They're not going to be happy about it. Either they'll leave, they'll put the mask on, they're giving away masks, there's no excuse not to wear one. There's going to be an occasional case where somebody says, "Well, I'm not going to wear the mask and I'm going to come in there anyway." At that point, there is an enforcement mechanism, because Home Depot can simply ask them to leave, and at which time they refuse, then that becomes trespassing. They can call the police, will respond, and in most cases, we handle it without an arrest or a ticket. They just leave, and that's the end of it. We're going to see maybe more and more of the particular corporate-based businesses in town that are going to go to that, not just our town, the whole county. So I think there's a certain freedom in allowing these businesses, obviously, to run their business as they see fit, and I think that's probably a better angle than saying we're going to mandate all businesses, because we got some businesses that in our city would adamantly object to that. And that may not be a place where we want to be, with a town with 600-plus businesses. So I think we're on the right track. Mr. Silvers?
I think it was mentioned earlier in this conversation, but it slipped my mind. Chris Engel, people coming into our city hall here, the police station, community center, is it just strongly recommended that they wear a mask? Okay.
It is strongly recommended.
So I guess the question I do want to ask the council is, like, today, I have been continuing going to the community center daily to work out. I have been experiencing this a lot, but especially today, people not wearing masks. I've been wearing masks 100%. Coughing without covering their mouths, sneezing without covering their mouths. There's a guy all day, all this morning, I actually left the community center because he was coughing the entire time. Does it make sense for us to, if businesses are in our community are mandating it, that we at least mandate in city-funded, tax-funded buildings that people wear masks? And like I said, I'm just posing this question. I'm not saying that I recommended it. I'm just bringing it up as a question.
Well, we've discussed this today, and this is like a lot of things. In certain parts of the city, certain city buildings, that's probably going to require a lot more attention than others. The biggest problem, as I see it, is the community center, because these are customers. Could we do it? Absolutely. Will there be pushback? Absolutely. And I think that we need to be cognizant of that. We have people that are swimming outdoors. They're not going to be wearing masks when they're in the swimming pool. These are customers that are paying to be there. So should they choose not to come because of a mandate that we require, are we going to have to pay them back? There's a whole bunch of other issues that revolve just around the community center. City Hall, we have people that come in here for court. We have people that come in and pay fines and get their licenses and do other things. It would be an easier thing to do here than it would be the community center. So it's just one of those things that's going to impact the city operations differently. It's not really a one-size-fits-all approach because it's going to impact our operation differently depending upon where we do it and how we do it. Mr. Engel, do you have anything to add to that?
No, other than that staff met when the CDC recommendations came out, and we explored what the appropriate response was to the CDC responses, or the new CDC guidance. And we, under our own authority, set these levels because we felt that they best suited what was going on in the community. Independent of personal beliefs or anything else, as has been mentioned, enforcement is going to be a huge deal within our facilities. I kind of jotted down a couple things that we talked about. Enforcement's number one. Enforcement in terms of who's going to be enforcing it. It's going to be your frontline workers. That's going to be anywhere from a 16-year-old to a 70-year-old part-time person. You're asking them to debate someone about the constitutionality of whatever, and is that part of their job description? And if it's not, and we say that it's the next level or 2 levels up, okay, well, does that mean that our middle managers or our department heads should just hang out at front counters all day and not go to meetings because they're the appropriate ones to enforce? In terms of the police enforcement, or even if it was a codes enforcement issue, where does the priority of enforcement of a mask mandate fall? Is it more important than answering traffic calls? Is it more important than having a presence on Shawnee Mission Parkway that slows people down, even if we're not writing a ticket? That would be a council priority discussion. We did not determine that the rewards were worth the effort. Again, we came back to the idea of masks versus vaccination. If we're going to put the effort in to actually solve what we believed at the staff level to be the problem, vaccination was the problem, not masks. So it really came down to, and also just the fleeting nature of the infraction. The infraction is somebody comes in, could you please wear a mask? Hey, whatever interaction that becomes, even by the time someone can be there to deal with that, whatever has occurred, and it's probably moved on down the road. So it doesn't even, to that individual, doesn't even look like there was enforcement. And if we don't have enforcement, when we need enforcement somewhere else, does it kind of lessen our ability to enforce things? So we did explore those things. We did talk about those things. Those are things that are clearly evolving, and we will continue to talk about. But when we talked about them last time, we determined that the level that we're at right now was most appropriate.
I've got a question for our city.
Those are all great points. Thank you.
For our city attorney, in order to, if in fact we ever did that, and we decided to enforce the rule that in the community center you have to wear a mask, there is no enforcement mechanism in place without an ordinance that allows us to enforce, as far as I know, and there isn't one, so we would have to pass an ordinance.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and circle back and look at the UPOC that we adopted last time. There was an added provision, and Chief went over it again, of a public health order. The problem with relying upon that provision of the UPOC is, like I said before, this body does not have authority to issue a public health order. So the analysis almost would go back to what Chief said about Home Depot, or you said about Home Depot, which is if you're on city property, the city has the right on its own property to say you have to wear a mask, just like Home Depot does, or any other private individual. And if we were to ask a person who refused to wear a mask to leave city property, and if they refused, then you could go down the road of a trespass.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If I can add to that, just another dynamic that you'd need to think about. Nobody walks into Home Depot and believes that they are partial owner of Home Depot. People walk into City Hall and believe they are partial owners of City Hall, and that they have some sort of they're government owners. They're not Home Depot owners. So the perception of a customer versus a governmental owner is a different perception, and sometimes evokes a little bit more of an emotional debate.
Kind of like the guy sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk, saying it was his desk.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes, just for clarification here. Our policies and guidelines for city facilities is all within CDC guidelines, state and county things, right?
That is correct. We are strongly recommended, in accordance with CDC recommendations.
For
Yes.
CDC, who are we to go beyond what CDC says? Why are we discussing this? Let's do what CDC says, what the state says, what the county says, what the health professionals say. I don't know why we're talking about it.
Ms. Yadrich?
I'd like to wrap it up and just say, Bruce, we're talking about it because this is a transparent government body. There are other cities in the area that are exploring this, and I'm getting a lot of questions about it. And I think it's good to be clear on the record as a transparent city and say, this isn't going to work for us, here's why. So I apologize if you feel like I wasted your time this evening.
On the record that we're going to follow the CDC guidelines and the state and county recommendations?
Sounds like we're all in alliance there.
Yeah.
I just think that
we
it's,
are.
right.
Maybe one last comment to, again, put a period on this issue is, we have changed our policies with regard to how the public can interact with our city hall. We had a lockdown. You might not remember us approving that because we didn't. What we're talking about is operational, it's not policy. It can be looked at, viewed as a policy if it's kind of an overreaching umbrella type thing, but if we're going to ask for specific things to be done to different buildings, that's really operational, which is within the purview of our city administrator. He makes the changes. If CDC were to change the guidelines tomorrow, he can change the guidelines tomorrow as it affects to all our buildings, and he would. He has ever since we've had this problem. So we're always going to be on top of it, at least at the level at CDC's. Now, what we're talking about here is maybe going beyond that, whether there's, people agree or disagree with it. It's certainly a good discussion to have. We've decided that it's not working for us, or maybe we don't have the legal basis to do it, but at least we know a lot more about this issue today, right now, than we did before we started. I appreciate for bringing that up. But anyway, that's enough on that. Are there any staff items, Mr. Engel?
I do not. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple of staff comments.
Okay.
Because we want to end with a little bit more fun. Okay, I just want to thank Parks and Rec staff for the family fun nights. It was awkward because we changed what we were calling different things, but the gatherings in the parks were, well, one of them was pretty well attended and another one wasn't, but it was great to be out there. Also, the Night Out Against Crime, that was really great. I wish more people had been there. It was outside, and we could have covered our faces or not, right? And in addition to that, of course, I always talk about the art gallery. I love the art gallery. And I just thought I would bring this to demonstrate the awesomeness of our talent right here. Thank you, Scott DeBolt, for doing this. But this is, I wasn't sure how big it was going to be. And this is perfect. It fits on my Merriam wall great. So if you haven't ordered one, can they still?
I believe, I think
Yes.
they gave Anna 19 or 20 of those, but I
Okay.
can make you a bigger version if that's.
No, I love this one. It's awesome.
Are we
Anyway,
due
I
for
just
new
want.
name placards?
Oh,
maybe?
yeah, here we go. No, this one is just perfect. It's just like the one in the gallery. So I just want to thank everybody because I know it's been hard to get the community to come because we're all, is it safe, is it not safe? But it's been really fun summer.
Mr. Pape.
Yeah, I also just like to make sure people know about things that are coming up or upcoming events. And we have cruise night that's going to be coming up shortly. Is that this coming Saturday? This coming Saturday. So please bring your car or, something, or just come down and look at the other cars. It'd be great. But that's another great event that Anna puts on her staff. And we appreciate that. And we want everybody to attend. So.
Thank you very much. And there are no executive sessions, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
I'll second, Mayor.
We got
Oh, I'm sorry.
a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.